For have we not built the impossible? And for what? To share my bed with a Roman.
That's a very big question, considering we've overhauled almost everything that there is in Total War. So battles, if you've only played the original Rome, then everything about the game will be completely different. If I'm going to talk about any one particular feature, it might be maybe the kind of the tactical view or line of sight in the battles for me personally. That would be that in battles we have a line of sight that is based on real line of sight, so the terrain affects what you can see and what you can't see. If there are hills in the way, you won't see the men behind that hill. If there are trees, blocking line of sight or buildings, then that's something that's going to affect the ability for the player to see what's going on. That brings a completely new dynamic to the game. There is the ability to ambush even in situations where it's not necessarily an ambush battle. You can actually maneuver yourself into a situation where the enemy wasn't aware that you were there. And that's a completely different kind of game mechanic than you've had previously. Again, on the campaign side, I think the politics system is pretty cool. It's one of those things that's very special that gives it a really Roman feel and makes the game feel quite unique. Control, I'd say we've actually managed to make the game something relatively simple for any kind of player to control. If you've played any sort of first-person shooter or RTS game, then you're going to be very familiar with the WASD keys and the mouse select and kind of clicking to kind of target enemies and so on. I think in terms of maneuvering your camera around all over the place, those things are very simple. With the tactical view, it's very easy to see how things are working. So, for me, I think the biggest challenge we have is actually trying to kind of bring naval battles and land battles together and actually make that something that's controllable by the player and easy to understand.
This will never end! They will never surrender!
I think, actually, the reality is I think we're actually making more of those features more readily apparent available to the player. That's something that makes it feel bigger. Also, the actual scale of battlefields and the scale of combat is something that is bigger. But I think we've managed to create a very streamlined process that really helps the player kind of move into the game and understand the game and also identify the human face of things in terms of the cinematic camera going down into the battlefield. You can actually hear what the soldiers are thinking. You can understand what it is that's worrying them. For example, see them turning to their flank, because there's an enemy unit that's approaching nearby. It's something that's very intuitive to the player. They can understand those things. And then from the tactical view, seeing where all the units are laid out and also seeing where the enemy's attacking from, those things really, really make it clear to the player what's happening. And again, on the campaign side, we have an encyclopedia that explains the entire game. We have video tutorials that explain every element of that game. And it's very accessible. It's not one of those things, we don't just throw everything at the player straight away. They kind of start from a very small base. You start from 272 BC. You start with Rome under your control, and a couple of small regions that are kind of satellites of that city. And then you expand out from the Italian peninsula. You don't just start with the whole empire under your control. And the result of that is that you're slowly introduced to every feature. Each feature comes about as a result of your choices and your gameplay. So each element is something that you've researched, you've made happen, and you've unlocked. So each element is something that is it's given to you at your pace. It's how you play the game that makes the difference. It's about how you play the game that increases the depth. It's about how you look at the game. It's how you deal with the elements that are within it that give all that grand scope and depth.
Take those walls!
Sieges of cities. We now have more than 100 different cities in the game. So wherever you go, the kind of process that you need to go is going to depend on the situation. Some are walled, and therefore you're going to need to build siege equipment, which will then demolish those walls or enable you to get over the top of those walls by using towers, for example, or ladders. The other ways that you get into cities is by using espionage. You can actually kind of do things like poison the water supply. You can use spies to try and incite a revolt. So there are all different ways of actually besieging a city. It's not necessarily just brute force and attacking or getting you in the situation. And because of the different varieties of cities, how how you approach that and what you do, those things are things that you discover as you play the game. You know, you could be fighting in Rome, you know, in one turn, and then the next turn you're fighting in Alexandria in Egypt. Two have very different experiences, very different challenges that you need to achieve in order to succeed. Something that's common to all of those things is the catch point system, which is a very clear indication to the player what they actually have to do, either as defender or as attacker. Are you going to be somebody who gets in there and, you know, kind of like, you know, just destroys everybody and kills everybody? Or do you want to kind of like use more subtlety and tactics and actually just grab the key important points, and by taking control of those and defending those against the enemy, take control of the city? I'd say play it. It's great. It's really accessible. It's Rome. It's about the Roman people. It's about all the barbarians that they fought. It's about the Carthaginians, their elephants, Hannibal. If you've ever wanted to be Hannibal, if you've ever wanted to be an Alexander, if you've ever wanted to be a pharaoh, if you've ever wanted to be a Caesar, or, you know, a Roman dictator, or if you've ever wanted to be a barbarian from the north and creating the world in your likeness, then this is the thing to do.
Rome may have raised me, trained me, but my loyalty is to my people! Germania will be free!